Welcome! Today we're diving into a challenge that I think everyone faces, that feeling of being completely overwhelmed when you're preparing to negotiate. And hey, if you're a junior negotiator, this one is definitely for you. We're going to show you how to cut through all that noise and really focus on the 20% of prep that's going to get you 80% of your results. Let's jump in.
So have you ever been there? You spend hours, maybe even days, getting ready for a big negotiation. You've got your case down, you rehearse all your arguments, you've even thought about their objections. But then you get in the room and the conversation just veers off in a totally unexpected direction. Suddenly, you feel completely flat-footed. It's super frustrating, and today, we're gonna fix it.
So what's the secret? Well, it all comes down to the 80-20 rule. You might know it as the Pareto principle. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful idea. Most of our results come from just a tiny fraction of our efforts. And when it comes to negotiation, this means a huge chunk of what most people do to prepare is, frankly, wasted effort. Your success really hinges on finding and focusing on that critical 20%.
Here's how we're gonna break this all down. First, we're gonna talk about the preparation trap, why so much of our prep time just goes down the drain. Then we'll get to the good stuff, the 4 pillars of insight. After that, we'll build a real high-impact game plan, look at some common mistakes to sidestep, and finally, I'll give you a whole new formula for how to use your time for maximum effect.
Okay, first up, the preparation trap. This is that really common but deeply flawed approach where we spend all our time on things that feel productive, but honestly have very little impact on the final deal. This right here nails the difference between average and truly great negotiators. See, most people get stuck on the left side, in what we call the trivial many. They spend almost all their time rehearsing what they are going to say. But the best negotiators, they live on the right side. They focus on the critical few. They pour their energy into understanding the world from the other person's point of view. It's a total shift in focus, from talking to understanding. And this leads to a concept I absolutely love, comprehensive trivia. Just imagine, you're a procurement manager, and you spend 20 hours digging through a vendor's entire company history in their press releases. Sure, it's a ton of information, but is it useful? Not really. It's trivia. Now, what if you spent that time trying to figure out the salesperson's internal sales targets or what kind of pressures they're under? See, that's not trivia. That's leverage.
So if we want to avoid that trap, where do we actually put our focus? Well, that brings us to the solution, the 4 pillars of insight. This is the 20% of your prep that's going to drive 80% of your success.
And here they are. These are the 4 pillars. Seriously, think of this as your new intelligence gathering checklist. You need to understand their interests, know their constraints, assess their alternatives, and map out their entire decision process. If you can get a handle on these 4 things, I promise you, you'll be ahead of 90% of the people you negotiate with.
Pillar 1 is all about their interests. And this is key. It's about looking past what they say they want to figure out why they want it. For instance, you're negotiating with a software vendor. You might just assume all they care about is the price. That's their economic interest. But what if you ask something like, help me understand, what does a huge win look like for your team on this project? You might just discover that the salesperson has a personal interest in making this a huge success story so they can get a promotion. Now you're not just talking price, you're negotiating with their entire career ambition in mind.
So how do you actually uncover these hidden interests? It's simpler than you think. You ask questions, but not just any questions. You use phrases that invite them to open up their world to you. A simple, powerful phrase like, hey, can you help me understand what's driving this request? It doesn't sound like an attack. It sounds like an invitation. It shows you're curious, not combative. And believe me, it is one of the most powerful tools you have.
Next up is Pillar 2, knowing their constraints. Think about it. Every single negotiator has rules they have to play by. Do they actually have the authority to say yes to the deal, or do they need to get approval from 3 other people? Is that budget they mentioned a real hard stop? Knowing these constraints tells you where they literally cannot bend. That way, you can stop wasting your time pushing on a locked door and instead focus on the areas where they actually have some wiggle room.
Pillar 3 is all about figuring out their alternatives. You might have heard the term BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In plain English, it just means, what are they going to do if they walk away from you? And you can look for clues. If they seem really eager to get a deal done, or if they've already invested a ton of time with you, chances are their alternatives are pretty weak. But, on the other hand, if they're kind of vague about deadlines or keep mentioning other parties, well, they might have some strong options, and you definitely need to know that.
And our final pillar is one that gets overlooked all the time, identifying their decision-making process. You can craft the absolute perfect proposal, but if it gets stuck in their internal bureaucracy, it's dead. You have to ask, who else has to sign off on this? What are the exact criteria they're going to use to judge our proposal? What does the full approval process look like from start to finish? So many deals fall apart not because of the substance, but simply because the process wasn't understood.
Okay, so you've gathered all this great intelligence on the 4 pillars. Now what do you do with it? Let's turn that insight into a real, concrete action plan. Here is a super simple 3-phase framework to put it all into practice. Phase 1 is your information gathering. That's where you use the 4 pillars we just talked about. Then, in Phase 2, you build your strategy. This is where you actually analyze all that info, you decide what their most important interests probably are, you plan your trade-offs, what you're willing to give to get what you want, and you prepare your opening offer. And finally, Phase 3 is all about contingency planning. You're getting ready for the unexpected by thinking if-then scenarios. If they bring up budget first, then I'll redirect the conversation to value. This way, you'll never be caught off guard again.
Now, to really make sure these lessons stick, let's go over the most common mistakes that junior negotiators make and how you can sidestep them by just staying focused on what truly matters.
This table is pure gold. Let's break it down. The #1 biggest mistake is over-preparing your own arguments. The 80-20 fix? Prepare thoughtful questions instead. Don't just neglect your own walkaway plan, actually set aside 30 minutes to make it stronger. Don't just research the company, research the people you are meeting with. And finally, stop preparing only for what you're going to say. Start preparing for what you're going to hear.
All right, let's put all this together into a new formula, a new way for you to allocate your precious preparation time. This is where that 80-20 rule really comes to life. Now, take a look at this. I know this might feel completely backwards at first. Only 10% of your time should be spent on your own arguments. Instead, a massive 40% of your time should be on understanding their interests, their constraints, and their alternatives. Then another 20% on figuring out their decision process. That is 60% of your prep time focused entirely on them. The last 30% is for your own strategy and your contingency plans. This is how you make the shift from being a debater to being a problem solver.
And if there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. Preparation isn't about arming yourself with a bunch of facts and logic to go win a fight. It's about developing the curiosity and the understanding to solve a puzzle together. The most persuasive thing you can do isn't to make an argument. It's to ask a question that helps them see the logic for themselves.
So let's do a super quick recap of the most important points. Remember, 80% of your success is going to come from just 20% of your prep. Your focus needs to be on those 4 pillars: interests, constraints, alternatives, and process. You have to actively avoid that trap of just rehearsing your own script, and instead shift your time and energy into truly deeply understanding their world. And that brings us to our final question for you. Think about the very next negotiation you have on your calendar, whether it's big or small. Based on everything we've talked about today, where are you going to focus your crucial 20%? Because the answer to that question, well, it could change everything. Thanks for joining us.